Welcome into Candlestick Chronicles, a 49ers podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Kyle Madson. I write about the 49ers over at NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. Joining me right now, avid outdoorsman Chris Biderman. And before we talk about 49ers Seahawks, we got to tell you about our homies over at Lamb Chops. That is the official clothing brand of Candlestick Chronicles. SGLambchops.com is the website. That's also where you can find them on Instagram at SGLambchops. They got photos and reels and stuff of all their new clothes, different ways to style them. They are super dope, which is the most important thing, but really high quality, really comfortable. They got something for all seasons. Shorts, t-shirts. They have new joggers out. They have a new hoodie out. They have a new Letterman jacket out, and it's all so fire. So go get yourself some lamb chops. It's the holiday season. Get something for your friends, your family. Everybody in your life should be rocking lamb chops right now because, like I said, it looks dope. And that's what you want for the people in your life. Use promo code Candlestick20. You get 20% off your order while you're there.
Zipper pockets. Game changers. That's all I got to say.
I love that for you. Candlestick 20. Get yourself some zipper pocket shorts today. Join the herd. SGLambchops.com. We're also sponsored by Cooperage Brewing. Cooperage Brewing out in Santa Rosa. Go visit the brewery. I'm telling you. It's a great place to hang out. Indoor and outdoor seating. Bring a pup. Bring an empty stomach. There's always a good food truck out there. Bring a palate that's ready to taste a wide variety of different beers. You know, sometimes you go to a craft brewery. I think this is my favorite thing about Coop. Is sometimes you'll go to a craft brewery and it'll be like and I love an IPA. This is not a knock on IPAs. But it'll be like 8 different IPAs and then a Pilsner and then a seltzer, and that's what they got. And at Coop, there's always a wide variety of beer, and it is all so damn good. So whatever kind of beer you like, you can get it on tap. And then when you find something you like, you can jump on CooperageBrewing.com and you can order a case. They'll send it right to your front door if you're 21 and over and in the state of California. They will send you a case of beer, 1-day shipping to your front door. All you got to do is sign for it. It's the best way to acquire beer. And it's all really, really good at Cooperage Brewing.
We have the menu up right now, streaming live on our YouTube page. Mellow Sunshine Wheat Ale, if wheat ale is your thing. They have strawberry, watermelon, and mint sparkle pants, hard seltzer 4-packs. Sure. If those are your things. $1 pills, y'all. Of course, Candlestick Chronicles Hazy IPA you can get. And all of their IPAs, their hazies, their pale ales, all delicious, all stack up against anything that you can get anywhere in Northern California. They say Santa Rosa is the craft beer capital of the country. I would tend to agree, and I would put Cooperage's offerings up against anything. It's as good, if not better, than anything else. So shout out to our homies at Cooperage.
I'm going to get some of that Shatter Shield oatmeal stout. Love an oatmeal stout this time of year.
Yeah.
Nothing better than sitting at the end of the night, sipping on an oatmeal stout. It's one of my favorite things. Shout out to Cooperage.
I'm with you.
Love the homie. And shout out to Charlie from Cooperage for pulling up to Lincoln Financial Field and having a great time.
I got we can talk offline about the conversations we've had, but yeah, that's it. He was appreciative of the shout out on last week's pod. So
yeah, just pulled up to Lincoln Financial Field. Him and his friends started talking cash shit immediately after getting out of the car. I respect it. Yeah. I respect it big time. Love Cooperage. They make Candlestick Chronicles Hazy IPA, by the way. That's the beer named after our podcast. You should buy some. All right, let's talk Niners Seahawks. This feels weird to me.
That you didn't mention Danny Kelly's appearing later in this
episode.
It's in
the title. It's in the episode title. Somebody can't read. That's on.
Didn't make the intro, but yeah, we do have Danny Kelly coming up later in this episode.
Yeah, he's the best friend of the pod. Talk Seahawks with him. Kind of bigger picture stuff, not a ton of like super in-depth minutia, but big picture about this game and then about the Seahawks moving forward, because this is just I think the NFL's weirdest rivalry. Because it's definitely a rivalry between when we had Deebo Samuel on the pod, we asked him like, "Hey, what about the Rams rivalry?" And he's like, "Nah, we kick their ass. The Seahawks are the rival." And it's fascinating that that's just kind of been the case for more than a decade now, even though they've only been good.
It was the opposite. It was the Rams are the rival, right? He doesn't care about the Seahawks anymore.
No.
It's not what he said?
No.
Are we beefing on the pod right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I assumed it was the Rams because they were the roadblock, and he was like, "No, we always beat them. We have a hard time beating
Okay.
the Seahawks."
All right. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, because I
No,
was
you're right.
surprised.
You're right.
I was surprised.
I misremembered. You're right.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. My
So
apologies.
this is such a weird rivalry though because it's definitely a rivalry between both teams. Yet they've only been good in the last 12 years. They've only been good at the same time for like less than half of those years. And now the Niners are on the better end of it.
Niners have blown them out basically in 4 straight games. It hasn't been close, and you wonder. And we talked a little bit with Danny about this, but like, is Niners Seahawks ultimately the referendum on Geno Smith? Like, do the Seahawks look at, like, if the Niners blow out the Seahawks again, which seems plausible on Sunday, is that the scenario where the Seahawks go, yeah, we just can't beat this division foe with this quarterback, so we need
Maybe.
to try something else?
Maybe.
Right? Like, that's not, I don't think that would be crazy if the Seahawks, as you know, I think Geno Smith's been fine. I think he's been sort of what Jimmy Garoppolo was for the 49ers. Like, you can win with him, but he's not a quarterback that you absolutely can't move on from. Danny called him sort of an upscale bridge quarterback, like a good bridge quarterback. I would tend to agree with that. I think overall he just hasn't been as good as he was last year, and I think he might have peaked last year. I don't think you're getting better play from him as he goes into his early 30s, right? Or as he continues into his mid 30s, I should say. He's already 33. So that's sort of like the big picture thing for me coming out of Sunday. The Seahawks are more rested, and they've lost 3 straight games and 4 of their last 5. They are going to throw everything they have at the 49ers, and the Niners are going to be coming off, obviously, an emotional win in Philadelphia. They'll have less rest, which has proven to be a thing this year, including in Philadelphia when the Niners had more rest than the Eagles did. So, you know, like, I think it could be a little bit weird. Like, the Niners and Seahawks have played a ton of weird games, and I think you know, maybe there's an emotional letdown here, but I think for me, I just, unless guys get hurt or some weird stuff happens, I don't think the 49ers are going to lose this game. And I think for me coming out of it is like, all right, if the Seahawks lose 4 in a row and fall to below 500 after starting 5-2, do they start to like look at Geno and be like, all right, it's time to make a decision at quarterback this offseason?
Yeah, maybe.
And, you know, I wonder if Michael Penix is a mid-round, I mentioned it to you before we started recording, but if Michael Penix is a mid-round for a mid-first round quarterback, and that's where the Seahawks are picking, given how well he throws the deep ball, like, I could, you know, I know there's a geographical thing with him being at UW, but I just feel like I could envision Michael Penix throwing deep passes to DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
You know, that's just like, that just makes sense to me. I don't know if that would actually happen, but that's, you know, I do wonder, like, coming out of Sunday, do the Seahawks decide like, okay, we need to move on from Geno because it's not getting any easier against the 49ers?
Especially when you scored 6 against the 49ers on offense the week before, and then last week you go and hang up 35 on Dallas. If they come back and hang up 10 on the Niners again, I think that's definitely going to be the case where, okay, that's great. You're mid against the rest of the league, but you're just really bad against the best team in your division. That's just not a way to go about fielding a football team.
Yeah.
And it's weird seeing the Seahawks in this place because they were so good at team building there for a while, and now they're just, I don't want to say they're rudderless, but they definitely feel like they're trapped in a spot where they're going to be, you know, 7 to 9 wins, maybe 10 wins every now and again, but they're just kind of trapped in that cycle of mediocrity.
Yeah, like if they were an NBA team, they would be that NBA team that's like just good enough to be like maybe in the playoff mix till March, and then like, but not good enough to get a top lottery pick.
Chicago.
Yeah, you mentioned the Hawks earlier in a separate discussion. I was like,
yeah.
oh, like the Atlanta Hawks and the Seahawks, like
oh, that works
kind
for
of similar.
Sure. Yeah,
kind of similar.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me with this game, because if this was I'm gonna say a normal week, and I'll explain in a second. If this is a normal week, I'd pick the 49ers to win by a couple touchdowns. And that would just kind of be that. They're just better. Like, they're better everywhere.
Yeah.
And in their last 4 meetings, here's a crazy thing. Brock Purdy is going to make his 21st career start, including the playoffs, and 5 of them have been against Seattle. That's almost a quarter of his starts have been against the Seahawks.
That's wild.
In 21 of them. So I think the biggest concern for me from a 49ers perspective is not, oh, Gino's going to figure them out, or, oh, Seattle's defense is going to be the one that shuts down the Niners offense. Like, I think the Niners are going to hang up 30. And I do think we see kind of a slow start, though, where there is kind of a little bit of an emotional letdown, not only because the 49ers got a big win last week, they were on the road. Seattle played on Thursday, so they get the extra rest. The Niners have to come home, and now they have to get reamped for this game that was clearly meant a lot to them. They were saying it was 1 of 17, and this is just another week. It clearly was not that. And so now you have to get back on the horse and face a division rival that knows you really well. This screams like Niners down 10-6 at the half to me.
Yeah. And then winning 27-13.
Getting in at the half and being like, all right, okay, here we go. Figure it out. Yeah, that's it. And in games like that, it gets scary because, okay, you come out in the second half and you give up a long play and then you turn it over and all of a sudden you're down 17 and things get out of hand. So that would be my only concern. But I don't see a way that the Seahawks can just line up and beat the 49ers right now.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I just
particularly if the Niners have the MVP of the league.
Yeah, well, which one? You know what I'm saying?
I do want to, like, we talked a little bit about the MVP discussion with George Ahori of Pro Football Focus earlier in the week. But you and I haven't really talked about it. And, after the Dallas game, we talked about Brock Purdy, being a legitimate MVP candidate. And then that take aged like sour milk.
Over the next 3 weeks. Yeah.
Over the next 3 weeks, because the Niners lost 3 straight games. But now it's obviously back in the consciousness because Purdy is the betting favorite, quote unquote, to win the award. And, I don't want to do the Purdy rankings thing. I think the rankings conversation is like almost pointless. It's like, it doesn't really matter. Like, ultimately, Brock Purdy's playing at a high level, unequivocally playing at a high level, leading arguably the league's best offense. And it appears the 49ers can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy playing the way he's playing. And to me, that's all that really matters.
All that matters. Hypothetical
situation, put Brock Purdy on the Jets, like, it doesn't look as good. Great. Okay. I don't know what that proves, right?
Sure.
But the MVP discussion is interesting to me. And it speaks to, like, Purdy's having a really good year. And I think Brock Purdy being the leading candidate, what it says more about the MVP race and maybe the state of the NFL and perhaps all the injuries to quarterbacks throughout the league, particularly in the AFC. It's like that to me is what's happening here. Like, to me, if Joe Burrow were healthy, like, he would be the leading MVP candidate, right? Like, actually, like a star quarterback playing at a high level, leading a resurgent Cincinnati team, right? Like, that's how we would be talking about them right now. But he's done for the year. Patrick Mahomes' supporting cast has been terrible and cost them a few games now, and that's a reason why he's not, the leading MVP candidate. Josh Allen's Bills are 6-6, I think.
Yep.
So, like, I personally think Tyreek Hill's the MVP of the league.
I'm with you, bro.
Yeah, but
I'm right there.
But I completely understand why Brock Purdy is a leading candidate where he is, and I think he's deserving of that candidacy. I just don't think he's the most valuable player in the league. In terms of, like, you take him away from the 49ers, I think you could still approximate a really good offense with a different quarterback. I don't know who that quarterback would be. But if you take Tyreek Hill off the Dolphins, I think the Dolphins would be lucky to be 500.
I would tend to agree with you.
Yeah. So like in terms of like value, if we're just talking about pure value, I think Tyreek is that guy this year. But even a receiver being in that position to be talked about as an MVP speaks to just how weird of a season it is for MVP. And that I'm not trying to take away from Brock Purdy. I think he definitely deserves to be a candidate, but I think his candidacy speaks more towards the rest of the league being kind of weird in terms of like lacking the ultimate stars having the ultimate seasons, more so than just like, oh, Brock Purdy is like really, like ascending to super duper stardom. Like he's playing at a really high level. I think he's a top 10, top 12 quarterback. He's doing everything he needs to do to orchestrate the league's best offense. And like, I can't like devalue what Brock Purdy's doing because he does have an elite supporting cast and elite coach. Just like, I'm not going to be like, oh, Joe Montana wouldn't have been as good if he didn't have Bill Walsh. I just think, and Jerry Rice, I just think it's a silly conversation to have. Like history will tell us, we'll have plenty of time to put everything that Brock Purdy's doing in the proper context. We don't have to decide right now in the moment exactly whether or not Brock Purdy's elite. If they win a Super Bowl, then Brock Purdy's season is more or less unimpeachable, right?
Yes.
So, and that's it looks like the 49ers are pretty clear Super Bowl favorites at this point. And that to me is all that matters. Like, is your quarterback playing good enough for you to win a Super Bowl?
That's it.
That's the most important thing. It doesn't matter where doesn't matter where he ranks, whether he's 18th or 20th or ranked behind college kids or whatever. Like let those people have those conversations. And if you want to have those conversations, cool. Like I get why those conversations are interesting. Just to me, it's like the guy's playing at a high level he's playing the most important position for the best team in the league. And like, that's really all that matters. And that's why he's a candidate. It's not because he's better than every other quarterback. It's just because that's how the league is shaking out this year.
And he's doing it in an offense that's been good for the last several seasons. And he's made it way better. Like, substantially. By doing things that the previous quarterbacks were not good at. And I just, if the goal of your job or your hobby is to figure out what every quarterback would look like in a league average offense, okay. I'll keep track of wins and losses and who's winning the Super Bowl, because that's kind of the goal of the sport. Not to have the best players in what would be a league average situation.
Right.
As far as Brock Purdy as an MVP candidate, I'm with you. I am right there at the front of, if I had a vote, I would vote for Tyreek Hill as of today.
Yeah.
He's going to be well over 2,000 yards and 20 plus touchdowns. Or if Christian McCaffrey gets super hot here and averages 150 scrimmage yards a game and scores a touchdown and a half a game the rest of the way and pushes 25, 26 touchdowns, like, okay, maybe he's in the conversation. But there's two sides to this, I think, that are getting conflated. There's the who would you vote for? And as you and I have laid out, and I'd probably vote for Tyreek Hill. But then when I try and project, like, hey, who are voters going to vote for? What do we know about this award? Voters are going to look at the best teams and they're going to look at the quarterbacks first. And if there's truly not a worthy candidate, then they'll go elsewhere. But like, let's just look at and consider that the average voter is not grinding tape. Okay. All right. They're going to go to footballreference.com or NFL Jesus, which is a game stats and info system. They're going to go to those stats and they're going to sort the stats and they're going to go, okay, well, who was good or who was on a good team and who was good. And they're going to look at Brock Purdy. And if he continues on the pace he's on, here's what people are going to see. Let's say the Niners win out and get the 1 seed. Okay. That's just, we're going to go there for this argument. Niners win out, they get the 1 seed. Voters are going to go look and they're going to go, okay, the Niners are the 1 seed. Okay, let's see. That's a really good team. That's a very good team. Let's go look at Brock Purdy's stats. Where did he land? I don't know. Okay, let's see. 70.2% completion rate, 116.1 passer rating, 9.6 yards per attempt, 4,500 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 8 picks. Like, that's just an MVP. And
Yeah.
maybe this is the year that they all dive into context and decide that having good players on your team is a negative, and that not throwing the ball fast enough is a negative, and all that. Maybe that's the case. Maybe the discourse on Brock Purdy has gotten so wide ranging that it scares people off of voting for him because they've decided, you know what, he's not actually that good. And okay, but I'm guessing that's not going to be the case. People are going to go, wow, 4,500, 33, less than 10 interceptions in this economy, 9.6 yards per attempt, 106. Holy shit. On the number 1 seed? I think that's what people are going to look at, and I think that's why Brock Purdy would get a bunch of MVP votes.
Yeah, I agree. And again, like I think Brock Purdy is a really is a strong MVP candidate. Like I don't just because I think Tyreek Hill is the MVP right now doesn't mean I don't think Brock Purdy deserves it, or at least deserves consideration. I think Mike Sando, I'm looking for the stat. So Mike Sando in Monday's pick six column that he does, great name by the way.
Yeah, short for sandwich.
No, I mean the pick six, but yeah, it could.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, shout out to Mike Sando, friend of the pod. But there's this feeling that Brock Purdy only benefits from yak, and only throws short passes. Obviously, all of his his throws beyond 20 yards, all those numbers, you can look them up. They're all really good, right? But the point here, Mike Sando said yak accounts for 48.5% of Purdy's passing yards this season. The average is 47% for starting quarterbacks, so 1.5% above average for quarterbacks. The average was 48% for the past 10 MVP quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes was at 54% last season when he won MVP in 2022. So, Purdy's yak total or yak totals should not be used against him because Patrick Mahomes benefited more from yak than Purdy has, right? And there are all sorts of numbers. We can go back to what Nick wrote, Nick Wagner, our favorite cast member, weeks ago about Brock Purdy and comparing him to Mahomes, and there's so much stuff out there about all the other MVP candidates. If you just look purely at the numbers, Brock Purdy is absolutely in line with other MVP candidates or MVP winners. And so that to me, that tells a story that says, if Brock Purdy doesn't win MVP, then Kyle Shanahan better win Coach of the Year.
Right? Sure.
You know what I mean? If it Brock Purdy winning MVP to me would be a lifetime achievement award for Kyle Shanahan. Yeah. Because Kyle Shanahan's the guy calling all the plays. He's the guy picking out all the personnel on offense, particularly the skill guys. Kyle Shanahan is the one who's had final say on Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. And, I don't know if he was in the weeds in the 5th round of 2017 when they took George Kittle, but he was super influential in, getting Trent Williams. And he was obviously super influential in getting Christian McCaffrey. So yeah, Brock Purdy's MVP candidacy to me is real. I wouldn't vote for him right now, but he could have an insane finish to the season to where it's all right, Niners are the 1 seed and this dude's numbers, he's first in the league in every single statistic. And it's if Tyreek Hill doesn't have 2,200 yards and 25 touchdowns or whatever he's on pace to have, then it's then Brock Purdy's probably got to be it. And just because he doesn't look like Justin Herbert or, some of these other more physically gifted quarterbacks, I don't know that should necessarily be taken away from him.
I will have a goddamn conniption if Brock Purdy doesn't win MVP and people go, the justification from voters is, we'll look at the weapons, and Jalen Hurts does win it.
Right. Right.
I mean, what are we even doing here, man? Here's the nuts thing. So the reason this has really come to the fore is because he threw 4 touchdown passes and threw for 314 yards and was basically perfect against Philadelphia in Philadelphia, and the Niners blew out the Eagles, right? Right after Jalen Hurts had become the voting favorite to be the MVP. And Brock Purdy just so happened to have a game where it was a very heavy yak game for the 49ers. And so this is being used as like, wow, look, this is what all of his games look like. And the irony of that is it looked like that because he's been so good throwing the ball down the field that the Eagles took that away. The Eagles played a defensive structure that said, we are not going to let you eat in the 15 to 20 yard range. You're going to take these underneath throws and we're going to rally and tackle, and it didn't work out. So it's just, it's just funny to me. It is funny though, that's the takeaway. And it just kind of goes to show how shallow the discourse is. That it's oh, there it was. That game right there. I haven't had any games like this to point out, but that's the one. See, that's the one that shows that he doesn't actually throw it deep, when the reason he didn't is because the Eagles didn't want him to, because he's very, very good at it.
Brock Purdy leads all qualified quarterbacks. This is according to Pro Football Focus.
Get your PFF subscription today.
In adjusted completion percentage on throws longer than 20 yards. And he has
his attempt. Go ahead. Sorry.
He has the second highest passing grade, tied with CJ Stroud, just behind Trevor Lawrence on those throws that are longer than 20 yards. Trevor Lawrence is completing 50.9% of those throws. Brock Purdy's completing 63.2% of those throws. Not entirely sure. I guess there might be drops or pass breakups or whatever that are impacting that. But Brock Purdy's 63.2% completion rate on throws longer than 20 yards leads the NFL.
Yes.
And his attempts are, I mean, he's 19th in attempts.
Yeah, but look at the attempt rate. It's right there with, like, it's above Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, and right there with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
The Niners just don't put it in the air a ton because they're winning by a lot all the time.
Yeah, so he's really good at deep passes. So it's and there was a thing real quick. There was a thing going around like on Sunday, like, oh, Brock Purdy's an MVP candidate. Look at his touchdowns. And then it was a highlight of three of the touchdowns basically being all yak. And it's like, all right, just admit you didn't watch the rest of the game then. Like, admit you didn't see Brock Purdy throwing the deep out to the right sideline on 3rd and 7 in a moment where the 49ers absolutely had to have it on a throw that traveled 30 yards in the air.
Yeah.
For a 10-yard gain. That was one of the biggest plays in the game. Like, the Niners converted 8 of 11 third downs. A lot of those were just on really good throws by Brock Purdy. So his touchdowns were explosive plays that had a lot of yards after the catch. But to just say that, oh, he clearly didn't have the game we all thought he did because his touchdowns came via a lot of yak, ignores the fact that, like, no, he was really good for the entire game and made a lot of big throws that weren't those touchdown passes. So I think Brock Purdy, to me, I think at this point has to be second in MVP. I would go Tyreek and Brock. I wouldn't put Dak Prescott above Brock in terms of MVP. I'm putting
Dak right there, though.
Yeah, he's there, but I just want to, the Niners dominated the Cowboys, right? They won 42-10, and then the Cowboys beat the Chargers on the road 20-17. They beat the Rams 43-20. They lost to the Eagles. But then this MVP candidacy thing for Dak really started popping up 4 weeks ago. He beat the Giants, the Panthers, the Commanders, and now the Seahawks. Like, I just, if Dak Prescott hangs 4 touchdowns and doesn't throw a pick against the Eagles on Sunday and the Cowboys win that game, then I think we can have a more legitimate conversation about Dak Prescott as an MVP over Brock Purdy, particularly since the Niners and Cowboys went head to head. And, I do think that matters. But I just need for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys to be taken seriously as like an NFC contender. They have to win on Sunday because they've just been beating up on really, really bad teams. And I don't know that you deserve a whole lot of credit for that, or at least enough credit to be talked about as an MVP or as an elite team in the NFC.
Sure. Yeah, I think this Philly game for the Cowboys on Sunday is going to hold a ton of weight. I have a thing on Dak, but I don't want to forget this real quick. I think the irony with Purdy is the whole thing is, well, when they've been behind, he hasn't been able to bring them back. And I think the irony of that is is he hasn't been able to bring them back because he doesn't just take the easy throws in those big spots. And he tries to do too much. And he's actually talked about this where he said one of the biggest things he's learned is, I think he said this in Nick Wagner's piece after his 17th career start. You can read that on ESPN. It's really, really good. And he talks about how the biggest thing he's learned is to not try to always make the big play and to just make a profit on every down. And sometimes that profit is going to be 20 yards down the field. But you know what? Sometimes take that dump off for 7 yards and live with 2nd and 3. And that's the thing I don't think he's done in Minnesota. He threw those couple interceptions because he was trying to push the ball down the field. And maybe in that spot, it's better to, hey, take a check down, take the easy yards, and just kind of matriculate your way down the field instead of trying to get it all at once. So I find a little bit of irony in that, where the knock is, well, he doesn't throw it deep enough, but there's also a knock because he can't come back in games. But part of the reason he doesn't come back is because he's probably trying to do too much throwing the ball down the field in those spots.
Yeah, so I don't know how much this applies, but this has been something I've been thinking a little bit about lately. If there was like an elite college team and they were blowing everybody out by 30 or 40 points every week, you'd be like, all right, that's one of the best teams in the league. And you wouldn't talk about the fact that, well, they haven't played a close game yet and they haven't had to come from behind. Like they would still be the number 1 team in the league. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't use that against them. And maybe the NFL is different because it's a little bit, the playing field is a little bit more even. But and I've made the point, like really the only thing I've needed to see from Purdy to feel like, okay, he's unequivocally like a top 8 guy or whatever, is like, can you win in those spots when you're down, when you're down 5 points with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter? Like we just haven't seen it. But we haven't seen it, but I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to use that against Brock, if that makes sense. Like I'm not trying to say like that's a detriment to him. He just hasn't really been in those situations, and when he has, it hasn't worked. But it's also been without Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams, and there's been some extenuating circumstances. Like to me, even looking back at the Cleveland game, there were so many like dumb things that happened in the Cleveland game that I kind of just throw it out. If the officials had ruled it a fumble at the end of the first half, like it should have been, the Niners probably win that game. If Jake Moody makes the field goal at the end, they win that game. If he makes the field goal in the first half, that long one, they win that game. If
against the Vikings,
Tayshaun Gibson talking about Cleveland. Tayshaun Gibson doesn't drop that interception at the goal line, right? You remember that one on the last drive right before Cleveland? There was that play too.
Yeah.
So, and Minnesota, it's like if the Niners don't give up that touchdown at the end of the first half on that ridiculous blitz call, they probably win that game too. So it's just like, like these are all things sort of out of Brock Purdy's control. And we talk about those games as like knocks on his resume or whatever, but it's like, well, sometimes weird stuff happens in the league and sometimes it's not always his fault. And there are things that happen outside of his control that could boost his resume or his legitimacy or whatever. So I don't know. I just think like I said earlier, like the MVP stuff, I definitely think he's a deserving candidate, but I think he's a candidate because it doesn't feel like there's a true superstar playing like a superstar, which we normally see this time of year.
Do you know what Dak's done in his last 7 games?
I know the numbers are crazy.
His last set. Well, I was gonna do a whole thing. I looked this up because I was gonna write a piece about like Dak is not in the conversation. In his last 7 games, he is at 70.5% completions, almost 2,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 2 picks. The 17-game pace on that is 5,300 yards, 51 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Like he's been dominant.
Yeah, but against the Giants, Panthers, Commanders, and Seahawks.
Sure. But that's the same argument people make against Brock early in the year. So
yeah,
I mean, even against Philly, he was 29 of 44 for 374 yards and 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. I guess not. It's not like
Yeah.
he sucked. So yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
I personally put Dak up there, but for me it's Tyreek 1, Brock 2. And anybody trying to make the argument that Brock Purdy isn't an MVP candidate because of whatever reason, it's ridiculous. This has never happened before in the history of the NFL where you've had a quarterback who's good as shit and people are like, actually, hang on here. He doesn't throw it deep enough. Well, he does. Here's all these numbers that show it. Oh, okay. Well, his teammates are really good. Yeah, that's the point of the sport. Yep, that's called team building. Yeah, no doubt. Like nobody's ever brought up teammates in a freaking MVP discussion in the NFL. Happens in the NBA. Oh, Kevin Durant and Steph Curry are eliminated from MVP conversation because they're on the same team and they cancel each other. Okay, never heard that before in the NFL. This is a first. This has never happened.
I ultimately
This is
think
an awesome quarterback on an awesome team, and no, he shouldn't be in the MVP conversation. Okay.
And I think like having an MVP type season is different than saying he's the best quarterback in the league.
Thank you. It's very different.
It's a different thing. Different. Like even when Matt Ryan won MVP in 2016, I don't think like people were like, "Yep, I'd take Matt Ryan over Aaron Rodgers right now," or I'd take Matt Ryan over Tom Brady, or like that. It's just having an MVP season is just a confluence of winning and being productive, and your production leading to winning. Like that's what being an MVP in the NFL is. It's not the most outstanding player. If the NFL had a Heisman, then Brock Purdy's probably not in that discussion, right? If it were just like the most outstanding player, it's probably, it's probably Tyreek, right? But like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Christian McCaffrey's in that conversation.
Yeah, like it's just different. Like the most valuable thing, and this goes back to, we could have a discussion about what the award should be and all that. But I just think like people see that Brock Purdy's the leading MVP candidate, and it's like no one's saying he's the best quarterback in the NFL or the guy. Right. If everyone was available in a draft and you're picking quarterbacks, no one's picking him first. That's not what the argument is. It's just like you look at the best team in the league and the most important position on the field for that team, and the guy playing at a really high level, it's Brock Purdy. And it's just like, it is what it is. Like if we don't have to think about it like, okay, Brock Purdy won MVP, now that means he's the best player in the league. It's like, no, it's just telling a story about what the season is. And the season is Brock Purdy. The story of the season is Brock Purdy's playing really well for a really good team. And frankly, the rest of the field just is sort of devoid of the traditional candidates that we're used to seeing.
Exactly. That's it. That's all I got. That concludes our Niners Seahawks preview. No. you want to do some prize picks before we get to our Cooper's Brewing What's on Tap with Danny Kelly?
It's funny because we have Danny Kelly coming on, but the people watching on the live stream are not going to see Danny because we already recorded it. So Danny's coming on.
In post.
Danny's coming on the recorded version, coming on the podcast feed, but we will make a separate video that we'll post to YouTube where you can watch our conversation with Danny there.
Awesome. All right. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. It is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in America. It is super easy. You pick 2 to 6 player stat projections. You pick more or less on those projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. It's super fun right now because of the NBA NFL crossover season. They're doing a specials league where they are combining a basketball player and a football player and combining their stat projections to turn that into an entry. So you could do like Travis Kelce and LeBron James, more or less than 10.5 catches and made threes. And they specify which game it's for the basketball player if they have a couple of games prior to Sunday or whatever. But it's so much fun. If you don't have time to jump in and build an entry, which is something that I run into a lot of the time, under the little promo tab in the app, they have all these guest pickers, including Meek Mill, noted Eagles fan, and part-time rapper. He is
Meek Millie.
He'll do an entry and you can just click that and you can just ride with the guest picker. It's a really, really cool thing that Prize Picks is doing. And this is my new favorite part about watching sports, is just diving into Prize Picks every night. NBA games are about to tip off, or there's going to be a Thursday night game or whatever it is. I'm diving in and I'm making an entry. You should do the same at prizepicks.com/candlestick. Promo code candlestick for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right. Prizepicks.com/candlestick. Punch in that promo code candlestick for a first deposit match up to $100. We got entries for this week. Here's what I'm rocking with, Chris. I'm going Brock Purdy more than 256.5 passing yards. I'm going with the game script, by the way, of the 49ers defense kind of struggling out the gate a little bit, and the Niners needing to pass to get back in / pull ahead. So that's why I'm going Brock Purdy more than 256.5 passing yards. I have Chase Young more than a quarter of a sack. He hasn't gotten on the board, I think, since his first game. And I believe he's going to get on the board with a sack this week against a bad Seahawks.
I have that one also. Full disclosure. We're aligned.
Against a bad Seahawks offensive line, yeah. So I like Chase Young more than a quarter sack. Christian McCaffrey, I'm just riding it, dude. 114.5 rushing and receiving yards. I'm going more.
I have that one too.
Yeah, he goes 90 rushing yards and 25 receiving yards, and he's there, and that feels like a light output for him. Deebo Samuel, I have more than 13.5 rushing yards. He's going to get his 3 or 4 carries. He's going to average 4 yards a pop, and I think he's going to go more than 13.5 rushing yards. Jawan Jennings, I tossed and turned on this one. Thought about this one a lot. His receiving yard number is 14.5. That's the entry. I went less.
Ooh.
Part of me is like, man, he had the big touchdown last week. They're just going to feed him. Kyle Shanahan talked in his press conference on Wednesday about how they're the ones holding Jawan Jennings back. He's always there. He's always ready to compete. But I also think that, again, I think the Niners are going to be maybe not behind, but in kind of a battle in this one. And in those games, it's Deebo Samuel, it's Brandon Ayuk, it's George Kittle, it's Christian McCaffrey. I'm just not sure that the volume is going to be there for Jawan Jennings. So I'm going to go less than 14.5 receiving yards for him. And then because you can't pick all one team, I jumped over to the Seahawks side and I went Seahawks kicker Jason Myers more than 1.5 made field goals.
Okay.
That's my entry on Prize Picks. What do you got?
All right. So I also have Chase Young more than a quarter sack.
Yep.
I also have CMC more than 114.5 total scrimmage yards. CMC has over 100 scrimmage yards in 9 of 12 games this year.
That's outrageous.
And it looks like he has at least 130 in 7 or 8 of those, I think.
Good
so it looks
Lord,
like 7.
Man.
Yeah, he's out of control. His last 5 games, 133 scrimmage yards, 139, 103, 142, and 118. And he's scored 6 touchdowns in 6 games. Obviously a really embarrassing goose egg in Jacksonville, where he had 142 scrimmage yards but didn't get in the end zone. But yeah, CMC 114.5 just feels automatic at this point, which is crazy to say. I went more on Jennings. I think it's just one of those things where that's just 2 catches, essentially 14.5. That's like, it's just 2 catches. I think you can get there.
Okay.
And I went Geno Smith more than 242.5 passing yards. And that is just sort of similar to like Jalen Hurts last week. Like, I think universally the consensus is Jalen Hurts didn't play well, but he still almost threw for 300 yards. And it was just a function of some garbage time. Obviously got off to a good start from a yardage perspective, but I think Geno can put up a lot of yards in this game and it'd still be pretty lopsided in favor of the 49ers. So
I love that. Love that for you, man.
They're going to be sharp. I think they do have the extended rest advantage, and I think they'll try to jump on the Niners early with some deep passes and all of that stuff. So
Jawan Jennings is befuddling. 1 target, no catches in the opener. 2 for 51 against the Rams, but that was a game where Brandon Ayuk got hurt. The next game, no Brandon Ayuk against the Giants. He goes 2 for 31. Then against Dallas, 1 for 19. Cleveland, Deebo Samuel gets hurt. He goes 2 for 26. Minnesota, no Deebo, 5 for 54. Big game for Jawan Jennings. And then Cincinnati, no targets, no catches. Jacksonville, 2 targets, 1 catch, 8 yards. Tampa Bay, 1 target, no catches. Seattle, 2 targets, 1 catch, 7 yards. Philly, 4 targets, 3 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown. Boom or bust?
I think he's a late season guy.
Okay. You think he's built for this? You think he's built different?
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of the way everyone's built, he's built dissimilarly for most people.
Yeah. If you look at the way like a person is built, you'll notice some irregularities with Jawan.
in terms of his construction.
Right. Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for this portion of the pod. The live portion. Now it's
live portion. We're signing off. But Danny Kelly will be coming up on the podcast feed if you're listening there.
It's time for What's on Tap, brought to you by Cooperage Brewing. We're going to talk with Danny Kelly about What's on Tap, sponsored by Cooperage Brewing right now. Unless you're live. Then goodbye.
If you're live, we'll talk to you later.